Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Fyokas Machalamba. I'm the committee secretary. Members are still engaged in the plenary session. We will resume proceedings immediately once the session concludes. We apologize for the delay. Thank you so much.
Ashley, are you there? Could I just check at what time this meeting is going to start?
Hello. Morning, afternoon. I'm told it's going to start at 6:10. No?
Thank you very much.
Good evening, honorable members. I'm also not logged in yet in my room, in my place, just getting out of the car now, but decided to start this meeting. Welcome again for those that were with us in the morning, and welcome to other members who have just joined us. I know it's a bit of a challenge. Honorable members have just finished the House 5 to 6. And right now, either sitting in the bus or driving, we are now starting this meeting. Welcome to the team from, I think it's Sun International that is here now first. Honorable members, we are going to have what appeared to me short presentation, Sun International, Tsogo Sun, and the other one is a longer name. We'll get to know them. Just for confirmation, Ms. Machalamba, honorable members that have joined us, may choose to record again. Thank you.
Good evening and thank you, Chair. Present is Dr. Lomo, Ms. Clark, Dr. Leroux, Mr. Mutubatsi, Mr. Van Staden, Dr. Litlape, and Mr. Zungula. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, yes, honorable members, some of them would be logging in. I'm informed that they'll be logging in as we go along, but we do form a quorum, therefore we can start. Team from Sun International, you will be given 30 minutes, sorry, to make your presentation. Thereafter, honorable members will come back to check with you on the presentation, clarity seeking questions and comments, and then we will expect
Recording
you
in
to come back to
progress.
us. We will then expect you to come back to us with an explanation of some of those issues. So it's a bit noisy where I am. Just tolerate that for a time being. So I now invite Sun International to make their presentation. And thank you very much. 30 minutes, and then we interact with you thereafter. Thank you. Do request the department, do request the staff in Parliament to give you sharing rights for your own presentation. If you have not already received that, thank you.
Ms. Jean, you may share your screen.
Okay. We're trying to. Chair, apologies. We're having technical difficulties. Can you, to begin with, hear me? Am I audible?
I can hear you.
Yes, you are audible. We just need to see your presentation.
Yes, we're
Thank you.
struggling to get the presentation visible. If you'll just give us I do apologize.
Yeah. So long, you can start with your presentation. You know it. We will find you while you're on slide 3 or 4 when someone else. We're already behind time. We should
Yes.
have really had this done long time ago. You might have had a long pause. So just to know how you are going to start your presentation is critically important when you join the meeting. Please.
Yes. Is the first page visible? Yes. My name is Jean Meyring. I'm a member of the Johannesburg Bar, and I've been instructed by Steenskop attorneys to make these submissions on behalf of Sun International. I will, since I don't think I'm controlling the slides, I will indicate when the person who is controlling it might move to the next slide. So I will give that indication. Thank you to that person. So this presentation to the committee today rests upon the submissions made by the Casino Association of South Africa in September 2023, which then enclosed with it the submission of 2018, which in large part also remains relevant, even though, of course, the bill underwent certain changes. Excuse me? I'm not sure who's moving the slides. So, yes.
No,
Might I proceed?
please proceed.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sun International's position is that it, in broad terms, supports, of course, the bill's overriding objective, which is the reduction of the harmful effects of tobacco use. This has been evident through Sun International's historic and ongoing efforts to ensure that the harmful effects of the use of tobacco do not affect its patrons and employees. Next slide. Next slide, please. I'll proceed even though the slide hasn't moved on.
Then I'm not sure what is happening. I was trying to move the slides. They are not moving. I'll try again.
Might I proceed even without the visuals? As set out in those written submissions to which I've just referred, the position of CASA and of Sun International is that the bill in its current form, I'm on the second slide after that introductory slide. Yes, there. That's fine. Thank you. Would be both unconstitutional and it would have unintended negative consequences that would be highly detrimental both to Sun International, to the casino industry at large, as well as importantly to the public and the national fiscus. But the position of Sun International is that this difficulty can be remedied through a relatively minor amendment, which essentially takes the bill back to the current section 21B in the current act. So Sun International proposes that the bill be amended to permit smoking in strictly regulated designated smoking areas in casinos at the behest of as designated by either the legislature or the Minister of Health. This proposal, this comparatively minor tweak, would balance the interests, the various competing interests. The next slide, please. So the current regime concerning health and safety compliance in casinos, a number of observations. casino license holders operate in a very strictly regulated industry as far as the health and safety of its employees and its patrons goes. I referred a moment ago to Section 21B as being the model that Sun International proposes. But that existing section, read with a 2000 notice relating to smoking of tobacco in public places, permits smoking in designated smoking areas in public places, including, of course, casinos. The restrictive regime built into Section 21B, understood read with the notice, is aimed at ensuring that non-smoking patrons are not exposed to tobacco smoke. And it, in Sun International's respectful view, properly balances the various competing rights. Next slide. We are there already on the next slide. Yes. Over and above what I've just said, under the Occupational Health and Safety Act of 1995 and its various regulations, casinos have a duty to protect employees from the exposure to harmful substances, including secondhand smoke. Casinos are required to conduct risk assessments addressing exposure to secondhand smoke and to implement reasonably practicable control measures. Sun International has, and it continues to comply diligently with the various obligations that rest upon it, which in many cases has come at a considerable cost. Next slide, please. Gaming smoking areas are enclosed. This is the next slide, with separate extraction to ensure that there is no cross-contamination. Air extractors in designated smoking areas are routinely serviced and maintained. Sun International conducts air quality, ventilation, and hazardous chemical substance surveys at all properties through approved inspection authorities. These surveys are conducted biannually and include specific assessments of designated smoking areas. Next slide. And in line with the regime set in place, the existing regime set in place through Section 21B, read with a notice, the designated smoking areas of casinos do not exceed 25% of designated gaming areas, which, as I say, is the requirement of the notice, and no persons under the age of 18 are permitted to enter these areas. And the question about children is, of course, central to the protective purview of the bill. No children are in any sense at issue here, since they're not permitted in casinos. Smoking areas for gaming are clearly marked as smoking areas, again a requirement of the notice, and there are warning signs and self-help contact details as far as smoking addiction goes at the various entrances. So that's essentially the compliance with the regulatory regime already in place. Similarly, over the page, next slide, a similar requirement: employees who do not wish to be exposed to smoke are not required to work in designated smoking areas without any consequence. The language of the notice is without any retaliation. Company policy, Sun International's company policy, does not permit pregnant employees to work in gaming smoking areas, and various regimes are in place for medical surveillance. Next slide. Dedicated health and safety officers are employed. There are on-site clinics available for employees. And then there's reference to an expert report obtained in respect of the designated smoking areas at one of Sun International's casinos, confirmed that the levels of carbon monoxide are so low that they comply with the levels for an ordinary work environment as required by the Occupational Health and Safety Act. I then move on against this background to the proposed blanket ban on smoking in enclosed public places. And that is the nub of Sun International's concern with and criticism of the bill. And that is that unlike the comparatively flexible, reactive, and responsive regime set in place by Section 21B, read with a notice, here there is something very different, a blanket ban on smoking. So Section 2.1 of the bill imposes an outright ban on smoking within any enclosed public place, which is defined extremely broadly and includes any public place covered by a roof or enclosed by one or more walls or sides. This would include virtually all public places, entertainment venues, including casinos. What is more, and that was in fact Section 2.1a, and it has Roman subs 1 to 4. Additionally, over and above that, under Section 2.1b of the bill, this is 2.1b of the bill, in contradistinction to 2.1b of the Act, there's to be an outright ban on smoking outside any part of the relevant public place, which again would include Sun International's casinos within a radius that is to be prescribed by regulation. So whereas the minister previously had a wider regulatory power, now certainly as far as the matter of smoking in public places goes, it is a far more circumscribed power, and that is the power that one sees adverted to in 2.1b. There is crucially, in contradistinction to 2.1b in the current Act, there is nothing in the bill that permits the Minister of Health to make regulations that would permit smoking in a designated area inside casinos under specific conditions. There's no such power. Put differently, there's no provision in the bill that would permit an exception to what is plainly then a blanket or an absolute ban on smoking in all enclosed public places in South Africa. The blanket ban sets up two competing rights. On the one hand, the right to an environment that is not harmful, Section 24 of the Constitution, and on the other hand, the right to dignity in Section 10. And in this regard, reference is made in the 2023 submission to the important decision of the Supreme Court of Appeal in Minister of Cooperative Governance versus British American Tobacco, South Africa. And if I might invite the members to make a note of paragraphs 4, 28, 33, 35, and 36, 4, 28, 33, 35, and 36 of the judgment. Of course, there's much more that is meaty and important in it, but those paragraphs give a sense of the skeleton of the reasoning of the court. And it was that the Regulation 45 in that case, which prevented the sale of tobacco and tobacco products, that was unconstitutional and invalid. And importantly, the court said, as soon as a constitutional right is infringed, then a balancing exercise is required. But importantly, the determination, and I'm reading from paragraph 33 of the Supreme Court of Appeals decision, the determination of the constitutionality of Regulation 45, here it would be the blanket ban, involves a two-stage analysis. The respondents, we're in the Sun International and its allies are in the position of the respondents, are required to establish that the regulation limits one or more fundamental rights. And if they do so, the burden shifts to the appellants, in this case, the organ of state, Parliament to justify the limitation in terms of Section 36(1) of the Constitution. So Sun International says that the if you can move to the next slide, that simply delineates Section 36. Sun International submits that, in fact, the limitation of the right to dignity and personal integrity, the infringement of that right, which is constituted by this blanket ban, that it is not reasonable, proportionate, or justified. And in this regard, the following submissions are made. So in other words, in that balancing exercise, it is hard to see how this, and certainly on none of the evidence currently before Parliament, is it clear at all how that might be justified. And importantly, and I'll return to this, of course, in the memorandum enclosed with the bill under the heading Financial Implications for State, there's a single word, none. And that plainly can't be the case. I'll return to that in a moment. So the submissions we make in this regard is that the existing regulatory regime provides for strict regulation. It's Section 21B that I refer to repeatedly. Sun International, as I've also at the outset said, has implemented and diligently policed a range of measures to ensure that non-smoking patrons are not exposed to tobacco smoke, and thus the object of protecting non-smokers from tobacco smoke exposure in the bill has already been achieved. It is already achieved by the current regime. And might I just refer you to the preamble to the bill, which at 3 bullets says it's to deter people, especially children and youth, from using tobacco products. Of course, children and youth don't come into casinos. To encourage existing users to quit and to protect non-smokers from tobacco smoke exposure. So that triad of goals, aims in the preamble, the third of those I've just addressed, and earlier I addressed the first of those, children. There are other additional, less restrictive means, and one's got to test those objects against the means in the bill. That's the basic idea of rationality. You don't use a hammer to kill a gnat or a fly. There are other, we say, additional, less restrictive means to achieve the intended objects of the bill. And those were the objects that I've just highlighted. A range can be thought of: private membership access to designated smoking areas, creating further awareness on tobacco use, etc., etc. Sun International's casinos, as I've said, are age restricted, so children don't come into this. Over the page, the next slide. No evidence has been presented that indicates that banning patrons from smoking in casinos will encourage them to give up smoking. Experience in other jurisdictions, and this is detailed in the submissions, demonstrates, the written submissions of 2023 and those of 2018 demonstrate that the effect of a blanket ban is that smokers will stop frequenting casinos, causing significant reduction in revenue and taxes. Patrons, it would seem, would likely choose to gamble elsewhere where they in fact can smoke, and that is in illegal casinos or over legal or illegal online casinos accessed from their place of residence, where there's no regime to limit the use of tobacco. We go on to say that the blanket ban does not, in fact, align with South Africa's health. It does not align our health system with the WHO's framework convention on tobacco control. Article 8 of that convention clearly speaks of protection. It doesn't envisage a blanket ban. So we submit in closing that it would be, and certainly there's no available evidence to show that the blanket ban can be justified. Instead of the current regime framed in Section 21B read with a notice. I then turn to consider the significant unintended negative effects of the blanket ban. And it is important to bear in mind that on current showing, when the bill was presented and its memorandum indicates that there are financial implications for the state, none, and that can't be. With respect, we submit that the government has not considered or conducted any studies on the financial implications of the bill. And I repeat that the Minister of Health stated that there'd be no financial implications. The bill will result in a significant reduction in GGR. A reduction in GGR will result in a slew of unintended a cascading series of unintended detrimental effects. Experience from other jurisdictions demonstrates that patrons that frequent smoking areas in casinos are likely to opt to gamble rather at illegal establishments or at home. There's been no evidence presented to the contrary. And in fact, in the presentation, and we get to it over the page, there's ample reference to comparative experience in other jurisdictions. This, the sum total of this is that far from there not being any financial consequences, there will be a significant reduction in the gross gambling revenues generated by Sun International and other casino license holders. The GGR generated by casinos at the end of financial year 23-24 was 17.4 billion rand. GGR generated by smoking versus non-smoking areas for Sun International for the financial year 2024 shows that 64% of the total GGR was generated in smoking areas. Legal and illegal online gambling results in significantly reduced GGR. And then I refer in passing, not that it's unimportant, but it's dealt with amply and in some detail in the written submissions, and that is that experience in other jurisdictions demonstrates that a blanket ban, the use of a hammer to, with respect, kill a fly, will result in a reduction of GGR. And there are a number of illustrative examples, the Netherlands, the ACT in Australia and South Australia, etc. And they were failed attempts.
Let me disturb you. What's GGR, please?
Gross gambling revenue.
Oh, gross gambling revenue.
Forgive me, yes. I imagine that might have been a term of art passed about a lot today. Forgive me if it wasn't. It's gross gambling revenue. Over the page, there'll also be a reduction in provincial tax revenue. At the end of financial year 23-24, taxes levies for the South African gambling industry amounted to 4.8 billion, of which 1.8 billion was generated by casinos. If one tracks through the earlier statistic that the smoking parts of casinos contributed 64% of total GGR or gross gambling revenue, then one can make the sum, make the extrapolation into these figures. There'll be a decrease in VAT payments by casinos, a decrease in corporate taxes, and of course also job losses at casinos. On the 31st of March 2024, about 34,000 people were employed in the gambling industry, with about nearly 14,000 employed at casinos. There'll be a knock-on effect on associated industries and service providers, transport, accommodation, and the like. Also, there will be, in all likelihood, and in the absence of any evidence to the contrary, one must accept that there is a significant likelihood that there will be a ratcheting up, a proliferation of illegal online and land-based gambling. Land-based, that too, to me, was also a new term. Of course, it's non-online in real buildings. Sun International notes that there is a proliferation of such illegal gambling in South Africa, and that these illegal alternatives available to the public pose a far greater threat to the public. No responsible gambling measures, no taxes paid, no recourse for the public in cases of unfair treatment. And this has been this is relatively well established, and it's been recognized by the Gambling Board in its report, Socioeconomic Impact of Illegal and Online Gambling in South Africa. And of course, there'll be a decline in corporate social investment by casinos in community upliftment projects, which in the written submissions, the Casino Association of South Africa says its participants have been very proudly and committedly engaged in. Sun International contributes 0.1% of its gross gambling revenue towards a responsible gambling foundation. And of course, that contribution, as you see, is directly tracked to gross gambling revenue. In closing, against the background of the submission to you that in the first place, we say that there is no evidence, certainly no evidence available that indicates that the limitation of the right to dignity which was acknowledged in this context, in the context of making a decision to smoke or not to smoke in the BATSA decision by the SCA, that there is no evidence to show that, in fact, such a limitation is justifiable. The more so where there is a current regime which is far more responsive. It allows the minister, under strict conditions, to create spaces in casinos where those who choose to exercise their personal integrity in this way, where their dignity can be respected through allowing them to smoke. So what is the sum of it all? Sun International proposes the following, and it's a theme that I've woven through these submissions to you, proposes a simple amendment that will address both the unconstitutionality of 21A in the bill, and that will also avoid the extensive negative consequences of a blanket ban. And it won't compromise the objectives, and those objectives, the sort of triad of objectives I took you to deter people, especially children and youth, from using tobacco products, to encourage existing users to quit, and to protect non-smokers from tobacco smoke exposure. The proposal is that the bill include a provision which serves the same reactive responsive function of 21B in the current Act, which empowers the minister to allow smoking in a prescribed portion of a public place and under the conditions the minister requires. A further, and that's the central proposal that Sun International makes. We respectfully say that this has worked, that it is the right way to balance the rights at issue here, and that Sun International and the other members of CASA have, in fact, over the past several years, invested considerably in creating such spaces where those who choose to smoke can exercise their personal integrity and their dignity by smoking without there being any deleterious negative consequences for those who choose to do otherwise. A further proposal, and it's in the same spirit of being modulated and trying to find a midway course between...
Are you mindful of the time allocated to you for presentation?
Yes, I have 1 minute left. I've got a timekeeper here. So my last sentence is the following. A further proposed amendment is to permit casinos, similar establishments, to have outdoor areas which are fully ventilated, but where there is cover to protect both the participants in the activity as well as the gaming devices, so that there is another way of cutting through between the two extremes. Thank you for the indulgence and apologies for the difficulties we had with the technology at the outset, but we are indebted to you for listening to these submissions made on behalf of Sun International.
All right. Honorable members, we have received the presentation. Okay, I see the first hand of Honorable Clerk. Sorry, Van Staden came first. And then let me just note them. Honorable Van Staden, number 1. Honorable Clerk. Yeah, Honorable Mutubatsi. Okay, Honorable Mutubatsi. This I've seen 3 hands so far. Honorable Dr. Letlape, number 4. Honorable Zungula, number 5. Let me see if there are further hands up here. Okay, so far I've seen these hands. Can I get the colleagues to all raise their hands if they wish to, so that we take one round? We have 3 more other presentations. And request the honorable members that are here not go full force of 10 questions each. We will be here for the whole night, but in the morning you handle it yourself. Is there any other member, any other hand that I need to recognize? The following is going to be the order. Honorable Van Staden, number 1. Honorable Michelle Clark, number 2. Honorable Mutubasa, number 3. Honorable Totalitlape, number 4. Honorable Zungula, number 5. No other hand I've seen. Thank you. Please, Honorable Shabangu, let me recognize all hands one time. Honorable Shabangu, number 6. Honorable Shabangu, number 6. Anyone who is having a challenge with the gadget but wants to shout and take the hand now? None. Okay. Let us start, honorable members. I will not come in between members. Just follow each other as you know now your numbers. 1, Van Staden, 2, Clark, 3, Mutubase, 4, Totoletape, 5, Zungula, 6, Shabangu. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you to Mr. Meyering for your presentation. I won't ask about the constitutionality, it was addressed, and the finance issue was also addressed, although I only have 3 questions. Number 1 is, I want to know if you believe that, do you believe that the existing tobacco legislation is sufficient? Act number 83 of 1993. My second question is, does this bill have any benefits for public health? And do you think that this bill will be difficult to enforce? And if so, why? And my last question is, are you or your client willing to work with the Department of Health to amend or strengthen existing legislation where necessary? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chairperson. I've only got 2 questions after Member van Staden. I thank you for the presentation, Mr. Meyering, and the following. So would you advise me, are you in favour of the bill, except for the banning on smoking inside and smoking outside under a roof? No options on packaging or point of sale in your casinos was mentioned in your presentation. And that is an urgent issue. And then also, how are the casinos handling vaping in enclosed spaces? Is that allowed, or are vapers expected to do so in the current spaces that allow smoking? And then, Chair, just in terms of the constitutionality that was addressed in this presentation, if our parliamentary legal team could also just give us an opinion of what was in this presentation, I'd be most grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Chair, for the opportunity, and I welcome the presentation. Now, first, I just want to understand if Sun International has. Hello?
We are hearing you.
Okay, I saw that some. All right. I just want to understand if Sun International Group has conducted impact assessment and what are the outcomes if they have on if the bill was to go through as it is, what effect would it have, one, on the job losses, and financially, what losses will be experienced if it is to go as it is now. And secondly, I heard the presenter talking about the banning. But the direct question, who said that we're advocating for the total banning of cigarette because of tobacco? If I can, or this bill is intended to do that because it might be misplaced. With regard to areas that would be designated, you spoke about workers having the choice in the workplace if they are to go into smoking places. I find it difficult to believe that, having been a worker myself. I don't believe workers have a bargaining tool except where they have a union, and most of these areas where you are operating, unions are very slim. What makes me to be why must I believe that that bargaining power would exist? And yeah, so those are the three questions that I want to pose. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. My questions are, the first one is about the different products, just to follow up on what Honorable Clark was asking. Because there are different products, electronic nicotine delivery systems. If there was permission for designated areas for smoking, would you create separate spaces for the different classes of nicotine delivery systems? Or would you put everybody in the same space? Vapors, heat not burn products, etc. The second question is if you could provide clarity from your understanding of public spaces, would there be any areas left outside for people who smoke to indulge in their habit? And where would those be found? I'm just trying to find out from your understanding under the current provisions, do you think there'll be spaces for for people who smoke in outdoor areas? Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. My questions are very brief. The first is, given the nature of the impact smoking has on the public health system, and the research that you've done, making comparison with between different countries as to how they balance the issue of public health as well as the economic considerations, which countries are better suited for the committee maybe to really embark on a study that will enable the committee to know that this country had a similar problem and this is how they address the problem. And the second question linked to that would be, how then would you propose a balance between the public health considerations as well as the socio-economic considerations as well, given the fact that there is relatively high unemployment levels, which, if the bill gets to be passed in this current form, would make the problem to be much worse. And then the last question is relating to the compliance. In its current form, would casinos be able to comply with the provisions of the bill? I ask this because I think it would be a missed opportunity for the committee to just go through a bill, pass it through, whereas the prospects of compliance or implementation or enforcement is next to zero. In its current form and with the provisions that it has, does the sector believe that even the oversight bodies like your police or law enforcement entities, will they, based on your experience, do they have the capacity to fully comply, to ensure compliance of casinos? And does the casino industry or sector think that there would be proper compliance of the bill in its current form? Thank you.
We're waiting for you, Honorable Shabangu.
Thank you, Chair. I hope I'm audible because I'm still on transit. And
Yeah.
thank you for the presentation. I just want to check with the group that presented, because they talk about the exemption of the casinos, that the casinos must be exempted, and that will prevent. How will this prevent other hospitalities to also request the same to be exempted? Because when it comes to the smoking areas and stuff like that, because once that is done, then it will mean that all the hospitality industries will want the same exemption, which will then lead to challenges, since according to the studies, it shows that the designated smoking section don't protect non-smokers, and that will jeopardize the health of non-smokers. How can they justify this, that if they want to be exempted when with regard to this smoking, designated smoking, how can they prevent the non-smokers from getting this affected by the health problems that are related to smoking? Another one, the casinos, they've got clinics, and in their clinics there will be all types of clients that will go there, even pregnant clients. And how will the designated smoking protect women in these circumstances? Let me just pause there, Chair. I will wait for the answers. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, honorable members, for your questions. Let me add mine. There are a few, I think there will be three. Firstly, is just to make a general statement. I still wish to see smokers who are very considerate of non-smokers. For those who choose not to smoke, the current act was an improvement from what we had, but it actually have the designated areas. Let me then paint this with a scenario of what happened to me today, and I hope you'll be able to cut across, because this would have happened whether I was in a hotel or whether I was in a casino, but it happened when I was in an airport with a designated smoking lounge. There was a smoker who came out of that lounge. He did not come out and close the door completely. Talks about now regulations. He came out and was actually calling another person sitting right where we were seated. And I happened to go past there to have gone fetch a newspaper, and the whole smoke that came from that lounge, actually I got caught up with that, which therefore means what we did was good but not good enough. So we would want to move that lounge completely out of that space, because smokers are not considerate of non-smokers. So opening up the door with the smoke and not considering that this smoke is coming out to affect other people who are non-smokers was not part of that citizen. And that is why actually we would want to have these all these smoking lounges far away. It's an opposite of what Dr. Retlap was asking. How far? I wouldn't know, but they must be really, really far away from some of us. So what I'm raising, Mr. Merring, could have been either in the hotel, could have been in the casino, but this time happens to be in a lounge. So you'd actually advise me, is that being unreasonable to say, please move away from us? Because you choose to smoke. I choose not to smoke. So please don't do that. The outdoor areas that are fully ventilated probably need to actually assist us in that understanding. Now, rightfully so, because this is within your space, you are able to quantify what would be the revenue loss if there was to be a stringent issues regarding smoking, which I would agree with Honorable Motubase. It's not a complete ban, just regulate and limit and restrict here and there. But you are obviously not within the space. Of course, this is your choice not to provide this committee with what actually becomes the revenue loss, the spending that a country gets into in cleaning up smoke-related health problems. That part you're not comparing with what you get, because you might be getting so much revenue, but then match that with what you lose when you have to actually, because there are consequences of these products. Lastly, is there a possibility of looking into reducing the nicotine in terms of being in the smoked area? And I mean, I've seen in the other countries, they have what I call nicotine pouches. Of course, there's still nicotine, but to some extent, it's less exposure to my children and is less exposure to my lungs. What is your view on those things? Back to you, Mr. Merring and your team.
Yes, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. That was quite an array of questions, and I will endeavour to answer them as fully as I can. There may be one or two occasions on which or at which I might, and as a general proposition, say that we might shortly after this meeting, to the extent that there are perhaps factual issues that we can't deal with now, seek leave to provide you with that information in short order in the next day or two. But let me attempt to answer sequentially the questions that were raised. First, Mr. van Staden's array of questions about the difficulty to enforce. Will Sun International work with the legislature? There was also a question about packaging, point of sale, vapors, and then lastly, in fact, no, that was Ms. Clark. So, Mr. van Staden, absolutely, Sun International, through its participation in this meeting, equally through its history of engagement during COVID with government to deal with the difficulties in that context, its track record is clear. It is entirely prepared to, and it declares itself prepared to engage on the bill. And as you will have seen, Sun International's focus is a very narrow one. It and some of the questions have strayed much beyond the specific concern of Sun International. And perhaps I can just at this point, before completing engaging with Mr. van Staden's questions, just clear up the one difficulty that I think came out of the question of Member Matubatse. So when we speak about a banning, it's not a banning of tobacco products entirely, but it is a banning of smoking, a complete absolute ban on smoking in public places. That is the ban of which we speak. And that is the ban that is represented by the bill's 21A, read with 22 and its surrounding provisions, in contradistinction to the current regime where the minister can allow designated smoking areas under specific conditions. So that theme arose at a number of points in the questioning. It's not that we're suggesting that the bill bans the sale or the consumption of tobacco, but it puts an absolute ban on the smoking in public places. So that is the absolute or complete ban of which we speak. Are there, back to Mr. van Staden's questions, so yes, absolutely, Sun International is more than prepared to, and by participating here, declares itself prepared to be as engaging and as helpful as it possibly can. Are there aspects, and this theme also arose later, of the Act that will be difficult to enforce? Certainly, and in the context of these provisions, the specific sections dealing with smoking in public places, with which Sun International is concerned, there will certainly be difficulties, not least, and this is a question that also arose, or a concern that arose at a number of junctures, not least because in Section 2.2 of the bill, it seeks to also forbid the use of the smoking of tobacco in outdoor public places. The radius from entrances to confined or enclosed public places is yet to be determined by the minister, but there will certainly be difficulties around that enforcement. Ms. Clark's question about, yes, we indeed haven't taken a position in respect of packaging or point of sale issues. We simply don't engage. We don't have a concern with those issues raised by the bill. Our concern is a very specific one, and it's the one that I spent a half an hour trying to explain. It is with the notion that there can now, in no public place, enclosed or in fact near to an enclosed public place, also an outdoor one, there can be no smoking in such spaces. So that's the focus of Sun International's concerns. Member Matubatse, returning to your concerns, has Sun International conducted an impact assessment? And you questioned about job losses and the like. In this regard, I refer you respectfully to page 16 of the 2023 submission by the Casino Association of South Africa. In fact, it starts at the foot of page 15. In short, and I'm not going to read it to you in detail, I'm really just indicating to you that this is not an assessment that Sun International did itself, but that the Casino Association, of which Sun International is a member, and with the submissions of which Sun International aligns itself, it says there, in short, if there's a blanket ban on smoking, so that's the blanket ban we speak of, in casinos, this will almost certainly result in a significant drop in gambling revenue. That was the GGR of which I spoke, with consequential prejudice to stakeholders. And at the foot of page 15, CASA says, CASA has conducted an exercise of modeling this impact based on empirical data. The exercise at the top of page 16, this exercise shows that the blanket smoking ban in casinos would have the following consequences. And I'm not going to take you through it in detail, but let me give you a flavor of it. CASA estimates that there would be an immediate reduction in the gross gambling revenues generated by casinos of 18%, which translates into an actual monetary loss in the order of 3.16 billion for the country as a whole. Second, as a result of this reduction, provincial tax revenue, and so VAT, corporate taxes, and in the various subparagraphs of paragraph 46, you will see what CASA says the product of its modeling exercise is. And as some of the members correctly and with respect appropriately emphasized in the context of a country where unemployment is rife, this will have a cascading trickle-down effect into the surrounding industries. And in this regard, I can also refer you again to the comparative experience, and that is at the previous page, paragraph 45 and its subparagraphs, where there was a revenue loss ranging between 20% in the Netherlands at slot machines to 9%, 13% in Chile. It was 22%. And that was, in fact, a casino of Sun International in Monticello. So across those two paragraphs, with their quite detailed, granular subparagraphs, I would submit, Member Matubatse, that yes, there is significant evidence before the committee of the deleterious, the negative effects that would follow upon the blanket banning of smoking in public places as envisaged by the bill. Then, Member Matubatse, you were concerned about workers not having a choice, but in fact, in Section 7 of the notice of 2000, the notice relating to smoking of tobacco products in public places, it's referred to in CASA's submissions, and Section 7 reads as follows: an employer must ensure that employees who do not want to be exposed to tobacco smoke in the workplace are protected from tobacco smoke in that workplace. And employees may object to tobacco smoke in the workplace without retaliation of any kind. So that is what the current statutory regime says, and with respect, if there's a compliance difficulty, that is a separate difficulty, but certainly the notice protects workers. And might I inform you of the following, that Sun International has had no recorded occupational illness claims related to secondhand smoke exposure from tobacco products in its casinos. So that is a fact of which account ought also seriously to be taken. Then, in moving on, and I'm hoping, I do hope I'm covering everything, the question about, and this echoes in a sense, sorry, Member Clark's question about vapors. My instruction is that smokers and vapors will be treated the same, in the same spaces. They will be treated the same. And if I have missed anything, you will no doubt bring that to my attention. You asked, there was a question, and this was from Member Zungula, about given the nature of the impact that smoking has on public health, are there countries that South Africa can use as useful comparators? Now, the comparator countries that are put up in the CASA submissions, those comparisons deal with specifically the question of the direct effect of a smoking ban in public places. But Chile is one of the countries that with which we make a comparison. And Chile allowed covered patios for gambling after revenues dropped by 20% in the face of or in the wake of the complete ban. So certainly I would respectfully suggest that Chile and its experience of allowing covered patios, like the very idea that Sun International is fielding or suggesting here, Chile might be a useful comparator country. But this is a factual question on which I would, in order to assist the committee, like to reserve Sun International's write to, in a day or two, provide you if there are further useful comparators that we will seek and make a submission in writing to you within the next couple of days. But certainly Chile would be one comparator that may be very useful. And the next question from Member Zungula was about a balance between the socioeconomics, the bill making the problem worse. And in a sense, I've already addressed that by directing the committee's attention to where in the written submissions of CASA, which Sun International endorses, where the socioeconomic difficulties that are to be caused by this a blanket ban are detailed. And we say that it is, with respect, it is a hefty instrument, this blanket ban on smoking in public places, that through a more modulated instrument, and the more modulated instrument is already there in section 21B of the existing Act, that there is a far greater chance that the competing interests which have surfaced so importantly and repeatedly in these questions might be balanced. There was then from Member Zungula a question also about compliance. I think I've addressed that, but I think the question was framed in a broader context, where Sun International truly is focusing on this very small, very specific aspect of the bill, and beyond that, the other sections, whether there might indeed be compliance difficulties, it's not within the submission either of CASA or of Sun International to have addressed those. Then I turn to the yes, and I didn't mention Member Tetlape, but I think I've answered the questions that you raised about designated vapors and smokers together. Then the chair's questions about smokers being selfish individuals and leaving doors open and the like. Of course, that is truly a question about how, and in fairness to the chair, I read you, or I understood you to make this concession, that a lot has got to do with the practical structuring of these smoking areas, how they intersect with the rest of the premises. And there are a number of answers to that. One of them is that, of course, there are all sorts of devices like, for instance, air curtains, which CASA speaks of in its submissions, which prevent cross-contamination, the sort of seepage of which the chair spoke in the airport today, and that waft of tobacco smell that comes out. But there are, in fact, ways in which not only these can be dealt with, but that Sun International has dealt with them. And of course, there is, as I intimated, and as is mentioned in the submissions of CASA, there are various forms of ventilation. So the air is not, the air in the smoking areas is pumped out into the open. It's not circulated into the air of the spaces of non-smokers. Sun International does routinely, and this is in our slides as well, air quality tests twice a year, as I said, biannually, and these have shown very low levels of carbon monoxide, and in fact, as I said in my opening submissions, below the regulated required levels. And that is because, perhaps unlike, I can't speak to the facts of the airport in which the chair happened to be today, but because there isn't the type of sophisticated ventilation and the like that Sun International and other members of CASA do undertake. And then the last question or observation from the chair was a weighing up. He challenged Sun International to weigh up the losses, the commercial losses, the GGR, of which there was much talk, with health consequences. And that seemed to be the comparison the chair put up. But with respect, that's a false comparison, because it's based upon the premise, the false premise, that those who are prevented from smoking at casinos stop smoking. Ergo, that's a loss that must be then balanced with the health benefits. But that's not a logical comparison. In fact, the suggestion that was made earlier was, in fact, those who are forced out of casinos because they aren't allowed to smoke there any longer because of a blanket ban on smoking, they will smoke in their own homes in an entirely unventilated space. They will resort to illegal gambling. So with respect, that isn't the correct comparison, because it's not as if that commercial loss is then counterbalanced by healthy people. These people, in our respectful submission, would probably remain smokers. And so it's not the correct comparison. So we say in sum that there is a much better legislative remedy for the difficulty, and one that is modulated and that at the very least takes its inspiration from 2.1b. It might be, and our submission is 2.1b was more than fit for purpose, and read with the regulation-making power of the minister, which provides a flexible means of government, where the minister becomes apprised of facts, of information, of research that suggests the regulatory scheme ought to be hemmed in or to be let out. The minister, the current regime in the current Act 2.1b in the notice, provides for such responsiveness, such governmental agility, rather than the, with respect, rather blunt Section 2 in the bill. Those are the answers.
Yeah, Mr. Mering, we will continue engaging with you, but thanks for inputting what you did, because among the things that you raised, you are saying there are issues that I think our team in Parliament legally must look into and advise us appropriately. So we'll follow that part. But some of the issues, I won't get into the debate. I was not talking about people only smoking in casino, therefore having an impact. I was just making generally to all smokers, whether they smoke in homes or they smoke in their cars or in casinos, that there is this impact that it has on health. But let's leave that and agree that we'll continue engaging with you, because we have brought some of the issues that are to be considered by this committee collectively when we come to make a determination of going forward. But thanks for your support and thanks for your contribution.
Thank you, Chair, for a very friendly reception. I wasn't sure that certainly it's a friendlier reception than one usually gets from a judge.
We are here to learn. We have to make a law, but based on your contributions, because you are an expert and you are in the industry. Thank you very much.
Indebted to you, Chair.
Okay. Ms. Machalamba, can you get Tsogo Sun while we just, so that the presentation is already up and put up here, while members are making a cup of coffee, tea, and come back to this presentation. I do notice that some of the members who were challenged to travel I saw them in the in Parliament, formally in the seated space. Honorable Sine and are logged in now. Thank you very much. I also noticed Honorable Kako is also part of this meeting. Let us give ourselves about 2 minutes, then we'll start. So meanwhile, can we have a presentation put up of Tsogo Sun? Thank you.
Good evening, Chair, members of the committee. The presentation is going to be me. I'm afraid we don't have fancy slides as Sun did, so you'll be hearing from me as and when you're ready.
Okay, we're hearing from you, so you are the slides.
Yes, Honourable Chairperson, I am indeed the slides. I will endeavour to keep my presentation very brief. And as I say, as soon as you're ready, I can commence.
So we are not going to show us any movie of things that we can read and say this is slide 2. This is what we normally get here in these meetings. So that while we are on slide 7, I can compare what you had on slide 2 and reflect on that. You don't have.
We don't have that, but we of course we will make available a written note after the presentation, if insofar as that's helpful. I intend just to talk you through some of the main points that we wish to raise.
Okay. Yeah, we will take it because this is where we are now. I was not alerted by Ms. Machalamba that this is how we normally accept presentations that come through to us. Because there was a busy day today with legislative processes in the Parliament, I did not notice that you did not forward us your slides. However, we will then proceed because this is where we are now, and we would not give you another opportunity to present. This is your space. You can now start. Right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chairperson and members of the committee. My name is Luke Kelly, and I'm a member of the Cape Bar, and I'm instructed by Edward Nathan Sonnenbergs on behalf of Tsogo Sun Limited. And there's a number of entities within the group, but I'll just refer to them collectively as Tsogo. As you may know, Tsogo is one of the largest casino groups in South Africa, hotel and...
You are instructed by Cape Bar. What is that? Is that
I'm an advocate at the Cape Bar, and I'm instructed by Edward Nathan Sonnenbergs, the firm of attorneys.
Oh, okay.
So as I was saying, Tsogo is like Sun International, a very large casino group. It operates a number of casinos around the country. And let me start by saying that we align ourselves with the approach that's been adopted by Sun. And for that reason, I'm hoping to keep my submissions relatively brief, just to pick out a few points that perhaps are specific to Tsogo that might be helpful for the committee. And I understand that you've had a long day, and I will be very mindful of the time that's been allocated to us. Honourable Chairperson and members of the committee, just to give you a roadmap of what I intend to deal with, I'd like to give you a very brief, short background of the submissions that have been made on the bills to date by CASA. I'd then like to turn to deal with the constitutional points that you'd heard submissions on and just give you our submissions on those. I'd then like to deal with the topic of unintended consequences. So in other words, what are the consequences that may result from what has been described and what would be a blanket ban on smoking in public places? And then finally, I will deal, hopefully in a constructive way, as to give you a bit of a sense of what Tsogo would propose is a potential solution to the issues that arise from the current drafting of the bill. So turning then to the background, members of the committee will be aware of the submissions that were previously made by CASA. There were two. In 2018, submissions were made in relation to an earlier version of the bill that was then substantially revised. And then submissions were made again in 2022. And Mr. Mayering, on behalf of Sun International, took you through those. I had intended to do the same, but I don't want to cover ground that he's already covered because I'm mindful of the time. Now, The submissions that CASA made were made on behalf of the casino industry as a whole, and Tsogo, of course, aligns itself with those submissions and contributed to those submissions. But today it makes submissions in its own right, and to give you some further insights into what the conditions are now prevailing in the industry. Let me at the outset also make the following clear, that Tsogo is fully supportive of the bill, its overarching goal of reducing tobacco-related harm, particularly amongst children, other vulnerable segments of the population. That is indeed very worthy and important, and it's supportive of the legislature's efforts in that regard. The only concern that Tsogo has is the concern that was articulated by Sun, and that is that currently, as it is drafted, the bill imposes this blanket ban on smoking in any public place. The current regime, as the members will be aware, does not contain that blanket ban. It provides a power, as Mr. Meiring was explaining, it provides a power for the minister to tightly regulate, as is appropriate, smoking in public places. And that power is no longer proposed in the bill. And that is the issue that Tsogo is here to discuss. The constitutional aspects of the bill were addressed by Mr. Meiring. Just to briefly summarize what they are as Tsogo sees them, what the committee is dealing with is, of course, a balancing of constitutional rights. You have on the one hand, the right to environment that's not harmful to anyone's health. That's Section 24 of the Constitution. You have, on the other hand, the right to dignity, which is the right that, in this context, was discussed by the Supreme Court of Appeal in the Batsa case that Mr. Meiring referred you to. And in that case, that involved a ban on the sale of all tobacco products, as you may recall, during COVID, and that was found to be unlawful. And the reason why it was found to be unlawful, and what's really important for this committee to bear in mind, and as it gets advice going forward, is that the blanket ban in that case was found not to be proportionate, reasonable, and justifiable under the Constitution. And the critical issue there is that where a state limits a right through legislation, the rights of citizens, the onus is on the state to justify that limitation. So there must be empirical evidence to support the limitation, and there must be no less restrictive means that could be adopted to support the limitation. So that's just really a few extra points on the constitutional argument. Tsogo's submission, like Sun's, is that at the moment the blanket ban is not supported by empirical evidence, and it doesn't engage in that important balancing exercise, and that there are in fact less restrictive means that would achieve the same purpose. So we say that a regime that permits very narrow exception to the general ban on smoking would achieve that. In other words, if you were to give the minister the power, as he has now he or she would have under the Section 2(1)(b) of the current legislative regime, then the minister would be able to introduce regulations that would allow, in very circumscribed and very tightly controlled circumstances, smoking in public places. And that would avoid the consequences, both the constitutional consequences. It would also avoid the serious unintended consequences that may arise in the context of the casino industry. I think it was Member Shabangu who raised a question to Mr. Meiring around, well, what about other industries, other aspects of the entertainment sector? And the point that is an entirely valid point, Tsogo is not advocating for an exception for itself or simply for the casino industry. It's simply a power that would be given to the minister to provide, under guidance of regulation, some exceptions to what would otherwise be a general ban. This would be constitutionally compliant, as in many democracies where the state does not consider less intrusive means or adopts means that are not supported by empirical evidence, that legislation that limits rights is susceptible to being set aside. If I may then turn to the unintended consequences, and the headline point here, Honourable Chairperson and members of the committee, is that within the context of the casino industry, the consequences of an outright ban are very significant. You've heard from Sun International about its percentage of revenue that's derived from so-called smokers in its casino. And in Tsogo's case, it's done the exercise, and it has been able to pull data that shows that 70% of its casino revenue, it's described as gross gaming revenue, in other words, revenue from its casinos, 70% of that revenue comes from its smoking areas. So a huge percentage of that revenue comes from smoking areas. The concern, and it's a very realistic concern considering the experience in other jurisdictions that the CASA submissions referred to, is that if you ban outright smoking in casinos, those who come to casinos and would otherwise smoke will simply stop coming. And the result of that would be effectively twofold. It would obviously be extremely detrimental to casinos and to the fiscus, and I'll come on to those points now. But it would also not achieve the objects of the Act. And why do we say that? Well, what would happen is that those who would otherwise have come to smoke at a casino would rather than simply smoke at home. They're not going to give up smoking as a consequence of the outright ban. They're going to smoke in a perhaps less well-ventilated environment, exposing others around them to secondhand smoke. And it may force them, and I'll come to this as well, to gamble either online in a legal setting, a legally regulated setting, or in an illegally regulated setting, whether that's at a physical establishment that's not properly regulated or an illegal online establishment. Now, turning to the consequences of the reduction in the gross gaming revenue. Now, this is a very important point to consider in its context. How the provincial government derives revenue from casinos is as follows. It takes the gross gaming revenue and applies a percentage of that to tax. And that is then paid over by the casinos to the provincial governments. And the provincial governments, of course, use that then to fund necessary expenditure on service delivery and the like. So, for example, in the Western Cape, I understand that for online bookmakers, this is for those who don't have a physical establishment, the rate is approximately 6.5%, whereas for what so-called land-based casinos, in other words, physical casinos, the rates may go up as high as 19%. So the critical point is if one suddenly loses a big chunk of GGR, it's not simply the impact on the casino, which of course would be significant, but it's the impact on revenue collection ability of the provincial governments. It's not just the tax revenue from GGR, it's also, as Mr. Meyering pointed out, it's VAT receipts. So in other words, when people go to the casino and they spend money on VAT, on items that attract VAT, it's of course that loss too. And it's a decrease in the potential for corporate tax as well. And those are unintended fiscal consequences, which unfortunately have not been thus far acknowledged, as we've seen from the memorandum that accompanied the bill, and with respect ought to be acknowledged and ought to be investigated, because one of the key pillars of a legal process in arriving at legislation which limits rights that is properly justified and reasonable and proportionate is one that is based on sound empirical evidence to support it. The unintended consequences, of course, extend to employment at casinos. So casinos employ a very wide range of different employees and workers. A reduction in revenue is potentially going to impact that, which, of course, in our current climate of very high unemployment would be very unwelcome. It would also result in a reduction in corporate social investment. Now, let me just explain for a moment there. Tsogo Sun, like other casinos, it pays a percentage of its gross gaming revenue to corporate social investment initiatives. So, for example, schools or charities, those sorts of endeavors. And I think in Tsogo's case, the figure is that direct and indirect corporate social investment amounts to about 1% of its gross gaming revenue. So it's a significant sum of money. And the difficulty that will arise is if that pot, that gross gaming revenue pot, is reduced, so the available funds for corporate social investment is reduced. And that is an unintended consequence. And CASA has put forward evidence, as Mr. Meyering had intimated and had taken you to, in fact, that this is not simply the casino standing up and saying, these are things that may happen. These are things that have happened in other jurisdictions. They have happened in the jurisdictions that he pointed to, the Netherlands, Australia, and various states in the US as well, and Chile. And there were substantial reductions in gross gaming revenue as a consequence of an outright ban. And it therefore follows that the types of harm, the unintended consequences that we are speaking about here today are not speculative. They are likely and almost certainly would eventuate in some form. So what then does Tsogo say should happen? Tsogo's key recommendation is very straightforward. It is simply to preserve a statutory basis for the minister to designate, subject to whatever regulation may be appropriate, a smoking area in a public place. And the regulation around that may have to be developed. It may be that there's work needs to go into determining what the appropriate air quality control standards are, what the appropriate distances are of having a designated smoking area from non-smoking areas. Those sorts of things would probably have to be ironed out in the regulations. And in that regard, Tsogo undertakes, as I think Sun International has done too, to assist insofar as it can in helping to formulate those sorts of regulations. Because as I said at the very outset, this is not a case where Tsogo is saying to you, it is not supportive of the bill. It is very supportive of the bill. It supports the initiatives. It is very concerned, however, about the fact that there is in effect a blanket ban that would have these very negative consequences. The approach that Tsogo is advocating, I think, as Mr. Meyering pointed out to you, is also one that's which would be consistent with the World Health Organization's framework on the Convention of Tobacco Control, which itself doesn't require or impose or suggest or advocate for an outright ban. It would also be consistent with other jurisdictions. And just in that regard, approximately, I think 74 countries have laws that restrict some smoking indoors to a varying degree. There's a spectrum of regulation around the world as far as tobacco control is concerned. And what Tsogo can tend to do is, insofar as it's able, is provide you following today, in fact, potentially even in conjunction with Sun International, with examples of other jurisdictions where tobacco control is regulated, not through an outright ban. So in other words, South Africa would not be out of kilter or out of sync with the rest of the world if it were to have this narrow exemption for adults entertainment facilities such as casinos, which permit smoking to a limited extent and in a highly regulated manner. Casinos are also very well placed to police this sort of thing. So whereas some establishments may not be, casinos in fact are. They are because they are typically larger premises that have significant resources that go into upholding and policing other regulations. Security, they cope with all sorts of other stringent licensing requirements. They have camera surveillance, security staff, they comply with money laundering obligations, and they already have existing infrastructure to deal with designated smoking areas and have invested large sums of money in doing so. So I guess the point that we would want to get across to you is that wouldn't change. In fact, if there were even stricter safeguards and stricter controls that were put in place by the minister in due course, if the minister had that power to grant limited exemptions, then Tsogo would be very well placed, as would other large casinos, to ensure that there would be compliance. It's equally important, I think, to emphasize that designated smoking areas inside casinos are not intended to encourage smoking. They don't represent an invitation to permit people to consume tobacco freely. And if anything, sort of these kinds of rigid rules that permit particular activity like smoking within a confined and regulated environment make it actually less mainstream. And you find over time, as studies have shown, that this has deterrent effects because people are treated differently. And over time, that deterrent effect may in fact reduce tobacco consumption. The alternative is forcing people to smoke in their own homes, because as I said, they're not going to not go to they're simply not going to go to the casino. They're going to smoke at home, and that's an unregulated environment. So one loses the deterrent effect that comes with regulating it properly. So really, to sum up, Honourable Chairperson and members of the committee, I'm very grateful for any questions that you may have now. We respectfully submit that the committee proposes the addition of that power on the minister, similar to that, or even mirroring that, which is already contained in Section 2(1)(b) of the current Tobacco Control Products Act, and to permit smoking in a prescribed portion of a place that's properly regulated. And we would tender to assist insofar as necessary to publish new regulations or draft new regulations insofar as that was helpful. Subject to you, Chairperson and members of the committee, I'm very happy to take any questions that you may have.
Hello, Mr. Advocate. Have you finished, Advocate?
Yes, I have, Dr.
Oh,
I have.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Mr. Kelly, Luke Kelly. I had another gadget going off the battery, so I'm on another one. Let me then recognize honorable members. This gadget I have may not show. Let me recognize honorable members who want to interact with the presentation, which is those that to be similar to what we had initially. Honorable Van Staden, you take number 1 spot on the time. We are number 1, and followed by honorable number 2, Honorable Clark. And then this time, the third to slot is Honorable Zungula. Okay, in that order. Those are the names. And then after Honorable Zungula is Honorable Sine. That is what I see here on the program. Any member that wants to speak and is not able to raise a hand, shout. Let me take your hands.
I'm still gonna come to
Who's that? Honorable Dr. Likape. That's number 5. Okay. In that order, Honorable Van Staden 1, Honorable Clark 2, Honorable Zungula 3, Honorable Sine 4, Honorable Letape 5. Anyone that I'm leaving? Is there anyone I'm leaving out?
Chair, I'm struggling to raise my hand. Sorry.
Honorable Shabangu, you're number 6. Anyone else? Okay. Start, Honorable Van Staden.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just 2 questions from my side, and thank you, Advocate Kelly, for your presentations. Much appreciated. Advocate, in your point of view, do you think that this bill will pass a constitutional muster? And then you've been speaking about separate smoking areas and so forth in your casinos. But it's my view that these places already exist in most of the restaurants and airports and in your casinos as well. So do you thereby say that the existing tobacco legislation is more of sufficient, but it must only be regulated and policed in a much better manner than it's currently being done. That's all for me. Thank you, Chairperson.
Okay, members, let's do the same. Thank you. Come one after the other now that you know your numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Yes, the presentation obviously was very similar to Sun International. Thank you, Advocate Kelly, for your presentation. I'm going to ask you similar questions that I asked Sun International because there's no mention how your casinos would be handling vaping and the spaces in terms of vaping. Is that allowed, or are vapers expected to do so in current spaces that allow smoking? So is there any differential method of regulating within your venues? And then also, there was no opinion given in terms of the packaging in the bill and points of sale within your casino. Thank you.
If I may, Honourable Member Clark, just clarify your second question.
No, Honourable Advocate Kelly, you take down a pen and paper and you'll answer after all members have come through to you. Thanks.
Understood. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Advocate, you made an assertion about the constitutionality of the bill. My question is in relation to I think your premise is on the substance of the bill, but not the process that was followed to get the bill where it is now. Now, based on your observation on how the process has unfolded from the SACE report, whether the bill that was taken to the public and Parliament had public hearings, or the committee had public hearings on the bill, was informed by a SACE report which was outdated. The NETLEC part, where on one side the NETLEC protocols does stipulate that a bill must go to NETLEC before it is processed in Parliament, but in this case, it was not the case, and some of the observations that were highlighted by business in terms of the NETLEC process. So my question would be, put aside the substance part of the bill, based on your observation and the research you may have done, is the process that has been followed by Parliament to get the bill where it is, assuming the bill gets to be passed and signed by the President, is the process, can the process, be regarded as a process that meets the constitutional muster, especially considering the fact that there are recent judgments on public participation process and what the Constitutional Court correctly designated what are the processes that need to be followed for a bill to be properly processed in the best interest of the people. Thank you.
I understand. We just joined Honorable Dr. Klape. We said members would then know their numbers and stick to the numbers. But I think it's Sine before Dr. Klape. Sine?
Yes, Chair, it's me. My apologies. Good evening, Chair, and everyone in the platform. Only have one question, Chair. I just want to find out from Tsogo Sun, what steps is Tsogo Sun currently taking to protect their employees from secondhand smoke exposure in its hospitality and gaming venues? Because we normally concentrate on those who are bringing money, but they tend to forget the actual employees who are doing the actual work on a daily basis. Has the company conducted or commissioned any studies on the health impacts of smoking environments on its employees? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. My questions are, the first one, since you're an advocate, I'm taking this opportunity because we're talking about business here, but in terms of people who smoke and their rights, does this bill deal fairly with them? Because even though they smoke, they are also protected by the Bill of Rights in our Constitution. And in terms of their rights as people, in terms of having agency, even though it's a harmful behavior, suicide is legal in this country. Is their responsibility to ensure that they harm themselves safely? Or should we at the airports put them in the street in terms of being away from those spaces? Because in the airports, they're smoking at the entrances. Now they're smoking across in a small ledge at OR Tambo across the road. Is that where they belong? So I just want to hear from you with respect to that. The second question is, there's been engagement. The things that you present to us, I presume, have been presented to the department. In that engagement, do you feel the department has evidence to the contrary to what you present, or just listen to you as a matter of process without taking into consideration the points that you are raising? In a country where unemployment is rife, I'm just concerned about increasing unemployment without stopping gambling, where it'll go underground like other things, like we have with cigarettes themselves. We're talking about illicit trade. What would the impact of this be on illicit gambling? And what would be the costs in terms of lost revenue, lost tax, and lost income to the company, and lost jobs? Those effectively are my two key questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you for this presentation. Maybe let me take off by, as I'm appreciating the presentation, that from one of my colleagues that is talking about legal opinion, that as members of parliament, we do have legal opinion on this bill. I just wanted to clarify that we do have a legal opinion on this bill as members of parliament. I want to, I'm looking at this presentation from a point of it's about business and talking of loss of revenue, but at the same time, I wonder if the Tsogo Sun have tried and look at the research and other suggestions that the amount of money that is spent by the Department of Health in treating the disease that are related to tobacco or smoking. Because if you compare that and then you say there will be loss of, I think we look at it at different perspective. You will look at it from a business point of view, and we look at it also from the health point of view, because the health outcomes with the smoking, they are very detrimental. So I just want to check if you maybe look into that. And another one, Chair, this air conditioners, ventilators that they mention on this on their presentation, they are not guaranteed to actually prevent the non-smokers. I've seen these places. The smoke does not go up with these air conditioners. Some of the smoke, it goes through whatever, the doors and whatever. You smoke while you are outside. So I would want to check with the presenter. Sorry, I didn't get the name. That have they ever looked into the guarantee of these air cons? Because from what I know, they are not guaranteed to completely clean the air and protect the non-smokers. That's what I wanted to raise, Chair, and I think those were my comments and questions and also suggestions. Thank you so much, Chair.
Yes, thank you very much. Mine is one comment. Now that Honorable Luke Kelly, Advocate Kelly, was listening to Honorable to Mr. Mering, so and then he shares the same views. It's commendable to say you'd want this, that, and the other support. Improved and strengthened, but you're not opposed to regulations with those amendments that you are suggesting, which then must also be studied thoroughly by ourselves. I come on a different angle than the issue raised by one of my colleagues here, Honorable Dr. Letlape, and I'm advocating for the rights of non-smokers. And I'm saying I still wish to see in the world very considerate smokers who would be considerate that, because the previous, the current act allows them to smoke within designated areas, but that's not good enough because there still are secondary smokers and they are still not. When they come out, they just puff wherever they are, irrespective of whether there's a person around them who's not actually. So this cry of Dr. Letlape of putting them far away, very, very far away, is probably something that could be looked into, because for some of us, that is what you are actually advocating should not happen. And but how do we educate smokers to also know that there are rights of non-smokers? Because that is a challenge that they have. It's exposing a non-smoker to an environment that is polluted, and you don't really give any consideration for that part. And that is something that actually is a weakness of the current act, among other things, that therefore wants us to really let's go a bit further than what we are. Back to you, Advocate.
Thank you very much. Chair, may I deal with the questions in the order in which they were asked?
Allowed any order of your choice. Thanks.
Thank you very much. There's been some very good questions and difficult questions, and I will do my best to provide certain answers. I think to take Member van Staden's questions first, you asked about the merits of the constitutional challenge, and then I think you asked about whether the existing legislation is sufficient. In relation to the constitutional challenge, you'll appreciate, of course, that the courts can view things differently, and different courts view things differently. What we've sought to point out is that the current bill, insofar as it has a blanket ban on the authority of the BATSA judgment, it does limit rights. And the minute one limits rights, then one needs to go through the proportionality exercise that's required under Section 36 of the Constitution. And that requires that you have explored all less restrictive means. And we would respectfully submit that we don't see that here. And for that reason, we would think there would be merit. But as I say, that's one of the arguments, and I certainly can't at this stage take it any further than that. On the existing legislation, well, of course, time has moved on since the current piece of legislation, the Control Act, I think was promulgated in about 1993, and tobacco delivery systems have become very much more advanced. And so I suppose in many ways that the new legislation is necessary to keep up with developments. But it doesn't, and Tsogo certainly is not going to make submissions to you about the broader aspects of, for example, packaging or other related issues around tobacco control. It's, as I say, its concern and its submissions are really confined to the fact that there's a blanket ban and no discretion whatsoever, no power given to the minister to create some carve-outs for that are appropriate. Moving then to Member Clark's questions, as I understand, the first question was around vaping. My instructions are that they're not differentiated currently. So in other words, vapers and or traditional smokers would consume their tobacco in the same smoking area. And in relation to packaging, as I've said, we don't make submissions on issues around packaging. I think it was Member Zangula was the third honourable member who asked questions, and the principal question, as I understood it, was around the process. And you correctly referred to recent judgments of the Constitutional Court in relation to the process. There has been engagement. Of course, there has been a public consultative process. We do have concerns in relation to the process on which Tsogo has received separate advice, to which I'm not at liberty to go into, and it's not the purpose of these presentations. What I would say is that what seems to be absent from the consideration, particularly in the memorandum, is the financial impact, the economic and socio-economic impact of the bill, as the blanket ban and all the consequences that we've referred to, which are certainly very real, and which the memo, in fact, accompanying the bill says there would be none. And that is arguably certainly a potential avenue for difficulty if the bill were to be passed. Turning to Member Sene's question, what steps is Tsogo doing to protect employees? That's a good question. So, of course, like CISA, and I think other casinos, no employee is required to work in a smoking area. There can be absolutely no consequences for anyone who doesn't wish to. There has been very extensive investment in infrastructure for separate ventilation systems for smoking areas and non-smoking areas. There are tests done, as I understand it, to ensure compliance with the Occupational Health and Safety Act and those standards. So there are those mechanisms. I'm not aware of any particular studies that have specifically considered the impact of secondary smoke. To Member Letlape's question around the rights of smokers and the concept of agency and dignity. Well, of course, that is indeed what the Supreme Court of Appeal was grappling with in the Batsa judgment. And inherent in the right to dignity is one's right to make choices, and of course, agency and self-determination and those sorts of things. And against that, one has to balance everyone else's right. I'm a non-smoker and I don't wish to be exposed to secondhand smoke. But equally, I don't wish to live in a society where people cannot exercise their own choices. It's part of the wonderful thing about our Constitution is it protects those choices, even if they're bad choices. And it's quite a slippery slope when one considers that alcohol is similarly regulated, but also not banned, and equally has very, very, very horrific secondhand consequences, which impose a great cost on the fiscus. But equally, it's a sector that employs an enormous number of people. So it's an incredibly difficult task that the committee has and that the legislature has to balance those competing rights and interests. But we would submit to you that the answer is not a blanket ban, because regrettably, as we saw during the COVID lockdown, and as one saw in America during Prohibition, is that people will find ways to consume products that are illicit. And that would simply happen. People would be forced out of regulated environments in casinos to just smoke at home in unregulated environments where those around them would be exposed to secondhand smoke in a way that people around them wouldn't be if they were in a regulated environment. And that is a difficult debate, and that is why we advocate for the balancing of the rights, not the complete prohibition. I hope I have this correct, but the second question, I think, Member Letlape, was around presenting to the department. I understand that we have made presentations. We were given that opportunity, and that those were made. Then I think, turning to Member Shabangu, you raise a difficult question that I think is probably beyond the scope of my submissions. But as I understood your point, it was that this is really about business, and the amount of money that is in fact spent on dealing with the fallout of tobacco smoke is significant. And does that not outweigh the revenue that one would derive, or the tax revenue, or the employment benefits that one would derive from smoking, permitting smoking in designated areas, rather? And I would suppose I would answer that in two ways. The one is that they're not mutually exclusive. The difficulty, of course, with the blanket ban, as I've said, is that it's not going to solve the problem. You're still going to have people who willingly harm themselves by smoking, as you will have people who willingly harm themselves by drinking alcohol. Unfortunately, that's not going to stop. The blanket ban on smoking in public places is not going to address that issue. What the exemption, or empowering the minister to regulate it in some way, to allow it in some very limited and tightly controlled circumstances, would be the lesser of those evils, because what we say would happen is that you would avoid the economic consequences that would follow. And you would have these people smoking in a controlled environment, as opposed to simply doing it elsewhere in an uncontrolled environment. I think the seventh question was Member Dlomo, was about the rights of smokers, and the fact that smokers, and I think you correctly point this out, smokers can be inconsiderate, and it's not necessarily good enough simply to have separate areas and separate ventilation. You are, I think, entirely correct that you have smokers in society who are inconsiderate, and it's certainly something that irritates me. But equally, you have those that are, in the same way that you have inconsiderate people who drink inconsiderately, or people who consume other substances inconsiderately. There's always going to be that impact that comes from what we regard in society as a social ill. I think it comes back to the point about balancing, and that's really the difficult act that the committee has to achieve, is calibrating the law in such a way that regulates what people would otherwise do anyway in a manner that is least harmful in other areas. For example, the socioeconomic sphere, where we have huge problems with unemployment that are really difficult to express in words, and that any legislative measure that is going to affect that, or that's going to affect the ability of provincial governments to raise as much tax as they can, those sorts of broader societal problems, we would say, ought to trump simply banning smoking outright in all public places. But I appreciate that others hold different views, but those are my respectful submissions on those questions. If I've missed any questions, please do say so. If I may just check with my colleagues, I'm not in the same room as them. If I may just check that I have addressed all the questions. If you'll just give me a minute, Chair.
Okay.
Chair, unless you or anyone else has any questions, which I'm very happy to address and would be grateful to receive, I don't think I have anything further to submit.
No, thank you very much, Advocate Kelly. You are leaving us with a message that says in your collective compilation of, because the department has given us a bill, a proposal, which we will finalize and panel beat it into a final product of parliament. You are saying, please do look into this issue of complete ban. That's the strongest message that comes from you, because it may as well take away that space of a controlled environment being actually looked into, and then allow people to smoke anywhere unregulated. Smoking at home, because they do smoke at home and smoke in their cars. This is my car, nobody must tell me. So we'll navigate that together. But that was the strongest message from your side. We will also be consulting as we go along, because as a lawyer, you are raising certain things that are legally to be checked as we go along as a team. But thank you very much. There are issues that we may have to come back to you to say, provide us with more of this, because at the end of the day, it is a desire of these parliamentarians to get a product that is pro-health, but also not completely eliminating a business here in the country. We can't completely ban. That's why some of us will say, no, there's not a complete ban of tobacco, but we have specified a ban on the particular area, a ban on the areas that are to be designated as smoking. No, thank you very much for this. We'll keep in touch. Yeah.
Just to say that we're very grateful for the opportunity. I know it's been a very long day and it's late in the evening, and thank you for the very insightful questions from everyone. And just to reiterate that we will, of course, assist in any way with answering further questions, and we would like to work together with the committee to arrive at a bill that's, as you say, balances everyone's interests. So thank you very much.
Okay, good night. Thank you very much. Honorable members, let's stretch a bit while Ms. Machalamba is putting together of flighting the slides of a very, very strong name is a Rebel Revolution Vape. Now, sounds very strong. Rebel Revolution Vape. Now, I wonder whether these are people who are rebellious against smoking, or they are rebellious against not smoking, or are rebellious against vaping. So we'll hear when they get a chance to present. In the next minute, you can start. Maybe let's just give ourselves 1 more minute, then you can start. So long. Can you flight your slides so long? Then you start.
Right. Thank you, Honorable Chair. Can anybody hear me?
We hear you, Kobas.
Thank you very much. You can tell me when I can start. I do have a presentation that I can share.
Share it so long with our team. We must give you sharing rights, and then you flight it there. We'll then take it from there. 1 minute. Thanks. Rebel Revolution Vape. Very strong word. Okay. Yeah, you can start now. Members will see and comment. Start and introduce yourself and what you are doing, Mr. Kobas.
Yes. Well, good evening. I am Kobus Visagie from Rebel Revolution Vape, and I would like to thank you for this opportunity to present to the Committee of Health our concerns on the proposed new tobacco bill in concerns to electronic delivery devices and so forth. I have to say I've been listening to the presentations that was done by Mr. Meyering and Mr. Kelly, and I feel very inadequately prepared for this. I'm just a small business owner, and I would just like to share my concerns that I have and hopefully address some answers and questions that you might have for me.
Put your
All right.
presentation on a slideshow, thanks. Just click
Yes,
button.
I have a slideshow, and I don't know, can you see the slideshow?
Put it on a slideshow. Right now it is appearing, but not in the slideshow version. Someone to help you there. There's a like an hourglass, a small little glass at the foot of the then you click on that. Click
All right,
on
let's see if I can get that.
yeah. Bring back your presentation and then go at the bottom of your icons. There's an icon that looks like an hourglass. And then you click on that one.
Oh, would that be on the screen? That's the Zoom one.
Yeah. Start bring back your presentation first.
Now it seems I disconnected. It's just saying.
Okay.
All right, it's showing now.
Yeah, it's showing. If you can't get it into that place, leave it as it is. We can see it. Okay.
All right. I'll try and work it from my side as I go along here. So yes, all right. Before I go into more details on how the proposed bill will affect our small business, I would like to share with the committee my personal journey of quitting cigarettes. I started smoking cigarettes when I was 19. I'm now 43 or 44 actually. While I was at university, and in my early 30s, I started feeling the negative effects of smoking on my health, and decided that I must make a change and try and quit cigarettes. This is where I hit the uphill battle that all smokers or ex-smokers face. The struggle of quitting cigarettes was very, very hard. I went from and I went to my doctor for help and for advice. I was told about cessation programs. I was told about nicotine gums and patches and sprays. Also told about a drug called Champix. And I tried all of these things for more than 2 years, all of which failed me miserably. And it was a horrible experience. Specifically the drug Champix that I used made me depressed, gave me terrible mood swings, made me sad and angry for no reasons at all. And the worst of it all, I was still smoking. And it was actually almost an effect that the cigarettes felt like a cure to the Champix instead of the other way around. So it was a miserable experience. After that, a friend of mine introduced me to vaping. I was highly skeptical of it in the beginning. My thinking again was this is just another stupid, dumb gimmick, like the gum or the sprays or patches. But I was desperate, so I gave it a try. Now, I'm not going to proclaim that vaping is a miracle and that it will make you quit smoking same day. That's not what happened in my case. It took a while, but eventually I completely quit smoking cigarettes. And another thing that happened is through vaping changed my whole life. Not long after I started vaping, I learned about you can make your own liquids. At that stage, I didn't have a business yet for this, so I just made my own things. But it piqued my interests, and I started mixing my own liquids for my own use. Then about 9 years ago, I decided to take the plunge and I built a small ISO lab, a commercial lab to develop and produce high quality vaping liquids, and that's how my little business was born. Let me just move the slides again. Sorry. So this in 2016 that I started that. We manufacture high quality vaping products, especially for adult smokers, and we mostly serve walking clientele in our retail stores that we've opened over the years now in the Northern Cape and in the Gauteng provinces. And our main objective is to reduce harm and provide less harmful alternatives than cigarettes for adult smokers or vapers. So basically, this small idea of me making my own liquids just to use myself sprouted into a business. We employ 9 employees, and we serve our vaping communities through our stores in the Northern Cape and Gauteng. And also, we serve our neighbors to the north in Namibia by exporting and producing vape liquids that we produce to them. So this small business has not just changed my own life, it's changed and touched lives of other people, the ones that we employ. And currently, I feel that the bill as it is in its current form is threatening this business that we have created. And also the vaping community at large, as it currently is, it will also be affected by this bill. All right. So vaping has had real life impact for many people, including mine, and our small business do help those people. We have clients that were smokers for 20 years, cigarette smokers. We have had clients that were bubbly users and has also quit that and uses vaping instead. And across a wide variety of spectrums of, some are salesmen. One particular gentleman that has been a client of ours for very long is a tool maker. We've got wine farmers there in the Northern Cape. We have some wine farmers. Our vape shops are support hubs for these people. They share their stories. They seek advice on how to use the products as they become available on the market. And it helps them progress in their journey to quit smoking. In my opinion, businesses like mine make a huge impact in helping people quit smoking, that some of the other alternatives, like the stop smoking hotlines or the nicotine patches or the actual prescribed medicines and stuff, didn't work for. That there is another alternative, and it does work for some people. It's not a thing that I proclaim that it will work for everybody. It works for a lot of people, and that's why we have our shops to help them with. My testimony, like I gave here today, is a testimony that is very common that we hear from our customers that come to our stores that had the same struggle as I did in quitting cigarettes, and eventually vaping helped them to do that. All right. So now if I move on to the concerns of the bill, some of the things that I feel that we have a concern for in our business as a vape retailer, how this bill can affect us, or what threatens our business, is that currently implied in the bill is that we will not be able to educate or inform our customers on products, as these products will not be able to be displayed. We won't be able to tell them about them. We won't be able to communicate information regarding these products, and thus won't be able to help them to quit cigarettes and in that manner. For me, it's not a sensible way. it's not sensible that the bill should prevent us from communicating with adults about vaping and the products that we have. In contrary, I would ask that government should help us design messages that will appeal to adult smokers in order to help them convert maybe to smoking, which would reduce their exposure to more harmful toxins and so forth in traditional tobacco products. In the same measure, that's also why it would be vital for us to be able to display our vaping products so that we can show these potential people that want to quit smoking on what is available and what can be given to help for them to help them in their journey. We would like to be allowed to operate transparently under a fair managerial oversight, like in many other businesses in our countries do. From a personal perspective or a personal journey that I can say is that in 2020, when the COVID lockdowns happened, a lot of vaping businesses actually closed because we were not allowed to trade during that period. And we were lucky in the aspect that because we were manufacturers, we were still allowed to export to Namibia. And if it wasn't for that, my business would have failed back in 2020 already. So I do understand how these managerial of the powers of that can be given to the minister to just make blanket changes without consultation or anything, how that can affect the small business. As clearly what would have happened in this regard is my business would not have existed as it currently is if we didn't have that small provision that we were still were allowed to be able to trade or export to Namibia. So yeah, the idea that the health minister will be given unfettered powers to regulate vaping ingredients, product standards, packaging, as and when or who may be allowed to sell vapes without undergoing normal consultation processes is of a great concern. Concerns about plain packaging, from the perspective of we being a manufacturer as well, it removes the identity that we can build as our brand. It limits the possibility of us distinguishing ourselves from other competitors in the market, and it will lead to eventually to confusion amongst your clients. If there's no distinctions that can be made between different products, it will create confusion with customers. As a manufacturer, to erase the product identities that we can create, it is very concerning. Another aspect of another aspect of plain packaging that might be concerning is that generic packaging might drive consumers to use either illicit or imported products that are unsafe. Counterfeit products can become a great concern in those sites, as it would be easier to counterfeit these products if it's, no distinctiveness can be made between different products. Display ban, prohibition of displaying our products. The visual inspection is crucial for customers in order to see and use the devices that are available, in order for us to properly show them how to use these devices. And an effect for us, not as a specialized vape shop, not being allowed to display anything that we sell would effectively close our doors, as we would not be able to effectively interact with the smoking population that we want to convert to vaping. Sorry, I'm just moving to the next slide. Banning information, again, vaping has so many different aspects of so many ways, different ways of vaping is done, that it is really important to be able to speak to people regarding, finding a way that would ensure that vaping would be satisfactory in order for them to leave their cigarettes. Again, from a personal perspective, from my own journey was, if the nicotine wasn't strong enough, then you would lack and you would want to go back to the cigarettes. And that's the sort of things that we need to discuss with a client when they come in and they want to move over to vaping, is to make sure that we help them so that they will be able to be successful in order to quit smoking. Then some of the, again, I have spoken about the ministerial powers and how that might be effective, the overreaching of that, how that can affect our businesses. Another thing that I can raise here that is, what I see as problematic, is the idea of vape flavors being completely banned. I, as a personal vapor, do not use any of the tobacco flavors or any of those type of flavors. I enjoy my fruit flavors. I enjoy a mint flavor. It makes the experience for me more favorable and makes me want to even less go back to smoking, which was a horrible tasting experience. So yes, by banning vaping flavors is a big concern for me as well. So the risks of the chilling effects of what most scares me regarding the bill and its current state is that vape shops will be silenced. Not even silenced, it effectively will be closed down. There's no purpose in having a retail store if you can't display your products or interact with your clients or in that effect. And then why I say we would encourage illicit trade is that's exactly what happened during lockdown. We were not allowed to interact with our clients. We were not allowed to trade and operate. And these people went to great lengths to find the things that they still wanted and the things that they still needed. And there is no regulation, there's no control then in that regards, where we as legitimate vape shops wish for those controls. We want those regulations and we want to comply, but we want to be able to interact with our clients. And eventually this will then deny smokers an access to a less harmful alternative. Something we do agree with in the bill as its current state is that the protection of the youth. We strongly agree with youth prevention in discouraging underage vaping. ID checks, we do ID checks of all our customers in our retail locations. In small towns like in Katu, where our one store is, we know our neighbors, we know their children, we don't sell to them. It's more controlled versus, for instance, a larger retail store location. The people behind the cigarette counter, they don't really care about those things. They don't check for those things. And it's, from a practical perspective, we do find that. We do have complaints of people walking into our stores and saying, but I can go to the big shop next door and they will sell it to me. Why don't you want to sell to me? And it's these type of things that we really want also to help prevent, and we want to work with government to prevent these type of things. So we are willing to adopt stricter age restrictions or standards for age restrictions and verification of vaping when it comes to that. A better way forward, protect the youth, public health. vaping is far less harmful than traditional tobacco products. We also ask for the respect of adult rights, has been, in other ways, has been brought to attention during this committee meeting as well. And we ask for the support of legal vaping businesses. And we ask that there will be consultation before regulation changes are made. So my closing plea is, I started this business to help people, not harm them. Please help us do more in that respect. The bill in its current form also shows for me that it will be harder for smokers to transition, as the communication and ways to transition out of smoking will be restricted very much more. Please take in consideration the use of plain packaging, the display bans, ministerial overreach, like the situations that we had with in lockdown, that the minister will not be given so much power so that sweeping changes can't be made without consultation, and that we not be silenced in giving customers information. I thank the committee for this opportunity, and I'm happy to answer any questions, although I feel like I might not be as adequate or eloquent as Mr. Meyering and Mr. Kelly, who spoke previously. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Fissache. Now it's your time to get pen and paper and note the comments that are coming in from members who would like to engage with your presentation. We will take we'll take all hands at one time and then give you a space to then comment collectively. And
I'll try and take notes as quickly as possible. I'm a man alone here. I don't have a team.
Honorable Van Staden takes the lead all the time. He's number one. Honorable Van Staden, you ask first, and you'll follow by number two, Honorable Clark, and the number three is Honorable Zungula. Let me follow, and then number four is Honorable Shabangu. Let me just check again. So far, I've seen those hands. 4 hands so far. Any other member? Honorable Sinne is number 5. Any other member? Shout if you can't. Raise your hand here. So it's 1 Van Staden, 2 Clark, 3 Zungula, 4 Shabangu, 5 Sinne. In that order. Thank you. One after the other. I won't come in between you, honorable members. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Mr. Fissache.
My hand is up as well, sir. I'll be at the last.
Right, yes.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Mr. Fissache, for your presentation from a business owner's perspective. It's much appreciated. I just have one question, Chairperson. And Mr. Fissache, would you advocate that vaping must rather be regulated under a separate legislation than all-in-one legislation like the one that is currently before Parliament? If you would agree, can you just in short say why you agree? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Mr. Fissache, for your presentation. Mr. Fissache, you're lucky. Member Van Staden stole my thunder because I had the exact same question for you. So I've been covered. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fissache, is this assertion that vaping and smoking is equally harmful based on your experience as someone who went from smoking to vaping, do you agree with that assertion? Secondly, assuming you have children, maybe at the ages of 15, 16, and they are faced with three options. Perhaps option one is that they don't smoke at all. Perhaps the second option is that maybe they do smoke, and the second option is they take up vaping. The third option is that they smoke. Now, considering how difficult it is sometimes to stop children from experiencing or to stop young adults from experimenting some of things like drinking and smoking, would you consider it a better option that kids, instead of going towards the route of smoking, but they go towards the route of vaping? Would you consider it better in now, as a person who was actively smoking, was aware of the impacts of smoking, and then later on switch from smoking to vaping? Lastly, does vaping, in your view, as person who went from smoking to vaping, assist in terms of getting people to stop smoking completely? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I'm just smiling because this is a self-proclaimed high quality e-liquid. And I've got a question there to check. How was this product tested? Your product, how was it tested for you to say it's a high quality? Because that is what you said on your presentation, that it is of a high quality. How was it tested? Because there is no law guiding this product at the moment. And my second question, I heard your story of your smoking and up to where you started vaping. But then, is there any study that was conducted, according to your knowledge? Is there any study that was conducted, or maybe any research that you have gone through to arrive at a decision that this product, the vape product, assists in to quit smoking? Or it's just the experience that you were sharing with us? But if there's any study, I would gladly listen when you explain to us that there is a study that proves that vaping assists one to quit smoking, and also how your products were tested to actually for you to say they are of a high quality. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chairperson. Let me not waste time. My two questions that I was going to ask were asked by my colleagues. Thanks.
I can't count, Chair. Am I next in the queue?
You are the last one, yes.
Just a few questions. The first is, in producing your vapes, what product standards do you apply? And what is the manufacturing process? Are you producing synthetic nicotine, or are you producing nicotine from leaf? And in terms of those issues that I'm asking, do you see any gaps in the legislative framework in terms of creation of standards. In terms of hardware, as a vape producer, do you retail any hardware? Do you supply, distribute any hardware? Do you manufacture? And just to ask one question differently, at a personal level, you've spoken about quitting smoking. Now, I'm not going to ask you about clinical studies. I'm asking about you yourself in terms of your own experience. What changes have you had in your own health when you stopped using tobacco and went to vaping? And ideally, what is it that you'd want to see incorporated in this bill in relation to vaping? Even if your answer to Honorable van Staden is a separate piece of legislation, but what would you want to see in that piece of legislation if that was your answer to that question? Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Visache. The current act that is silent on vapes because probably there was not there much at that time, and the industry has then been innovative on these issues. So vapes might be something quite new. That is why, Mr. Visache, some other sort of owners of such an industry have been saying through our public hearings, department portfolio committee do regulate. We are not regulated. We do as what I think you can do in the Northern Cape, in KwaZulu-Natal. So there's nothing that guides us. We just want to do business, and therefore we would welcome regulation. So, I also would wish that you also go along those lines, and I think you do. But what if one were to say, okay, let's allow and have vapes that will be used by adults, and actually ban all single vapes, because those ones are cheap and available and are freely available to any other user other than adults. And the other criticism that you find a lot of vape shops in and around universities. Of course, your argument may be most of those people are adults, they are beyond 18, but why should we be attractive of such products around these areas? Somebody would also argue that it's not a complete removal of the identity, but banning, this is actually done not for adults vapors, but largely focusing on the young people, young adults of these flavors being vanilla. Give me the strawberry today. I had a vanilla yesterday. Why should it go and have these attractive flavors if they are just to be used as nicotine such products? And therefore, the attractions and the colors that are there, somebody would argue would like to have a plain packaging because there's a desire to have a visibility of the health advices on the package, and therefore it's much easier if it is not all of it in one packet with these attractive colors, with these flavors that are in there. Now, the last one is I don't think you need to be very pessimistic and say if this was to go on, it will silence vape shops. Rather, it will regulate, maybe much stronger, but I don't think the bill is meant to silence vape shops, but to regulate, to say you would probably open from this time to this time, you are distant from the church or from this school, from this, something like that, rather than to say there's a complete silencing of the vape shops. Maybe then assist us with those responses on this. Thank you.
Thank you, honorable members. I will try and answer as many of these as I can remember and try to write down. Let's start first with Member van Staden's question. Should I, in my personal opinion, think that the bill should be separate? A separate bill would be good because I think there is a very large distinction between traditional cigarettes or traditional tobacco products and the current vaping products. Vaping products, in my opinion, is more a nicotine delivery system than a tobacco product. Or a traditional tobacco product. So yes, in that regard, I would simply say that the legislation should be separate. It's the products are simply just not the same. Then, Member Clark, as you noted, Van Staden already asked your question. I do apologize if I do mispronounce some people's name. Member Zungula, you asked me about if I had a child. Unfortunately, I do not have any children. I am not married. But my sister, which is the co-owner of this business of ours, she does have a small child. If that child one day would come to ask me what they should do, the first thing is no vaping, no smoking. That would be the first thing. However, if the next only possible option would be to vape or to smoke, it would definitely be vaping. By no even more consideration. As being an ex-smoker, there is no comparison between the two in that regard, in my personal opinion. Sorry, I am still very nervous. I did not really think that this would be so nerve-wracking, but it is very nerve-wracking for me. So I do apologize for that. Sorry, I did not get the rest of your questions written down. It was a little demakar on my side. Sorry, the member that asked about why do I call my products high-quality products? We do use, in order to make the liquids, we just produce liquids. That's what we manufacture, and then we retail other vaping products as well in our retail stores. Why I call my products high quality is we produce them in a ISO standard facility. We use food-grade flavorings that has been standardized in South Africa. We use medical-grade nicotine. We use medical-grade propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin in our products. And we have internal processes in order for our clean room, how we operate in our clean room. Yes, there are currently no regulations on how that should be done. We have self-regulated in that regard, but we do also welcome regulation to be brought in for that as well, to have standards for that as well. I think that also answers the question regarding the standards of the products. As far as I know, the Vaping Products Association is working closely currently with the SABS on standardizing or creating standards for those processes as well. Then experiences and studies. I apologize. I should have done more research in that regard. I don't have studies or something I can bring up, but from my personal experience with vaping and trying to quit cigarettes by other means that did not work at all and failed horribly, vaping really helped me. I have been non-smoking since the last 10 years. I have not used traditional tobacco products. I just use my vapes. Then production. I think I did that as well. And the standards. Hardware. My business, we do not produce any hardware. We buy hardware locally from suppliers. and sell those in our stores. Sorry, then I think I'm moving on to regulation of single-use vapes. In a personal opinion, I was very anti, even from a business perspective, very anti towards the disposable products. I personally believe they are very wasteful. However, from a convenience experience, there's no question that people do require those, or it has helped to convert a lot more vapers of people from smoking to vaping, just purely on the convenience factor, having to compete with the convenience of how easy it is to light a cigarette and use it. Where when I started vaping 10 years ago, vaping was considerably more complicated, and how the machines work and how the liquid had to work and all that stuff. It was very intimidating, and that process put a lot of people off. Where the single-use devices, I would agree, there are ways that we can be less wasteful with the single-use products. And in some ways, I do agree personally with the bans that has been done in other European countries, where single-use battery devices, where the whole battery is thrown away, type of effect, be banned, and rather encourage pod devices, where your liquid would be in a pod and your battery would be in a device that the two are separate from each other, and can be used in that regard. Again, sorry, I'm just speaking from a personal perspective here. I'm not a advocate. I don't really know the laws that well. I don't understand everything in the bill completely. As regarding to the government regarding the silencing of the effect, the complete ban on being able to display our products or display what we sell would effectively take away our whole existence of being a specialized store, in my regard, in my opinion. So yes, that would silence us as vape shops completely in a retail perspective. That would make it incredibly difficult to interact with clients if I'm not allowed to display. I think I made a note about, I raised a comment maybe, like how adult stores have to operate in our country currently, where, they are completely from the outside, just show their names, but inside you can see the products type of effect. If that is a route, or like the chair has said, if we have to be a certain distance, maybe from a church or a school, in the same aspect, would you have to apply that to alcohol and liquor stores in that aspect? It would have to be I would say, on equal footing almost. This is not necessarily the opinion of other vaping companies or brands, but I would recommend that vape shops be licensed and that vaping products not be sold in general supermarkets or in gas stations or convenience stores or things like that. But that's just my opinion. But that's the type of things that can be discussed. And again, like I stress, this is my opinion, not necessarily everybody in the vaping industry's opinion. Sure. Is there anything that I might have missed? Sorry, I struggled writing all of the questions down that one of the members might want to raise that I can try and answer again.
Yeah, we'll get back to you, Honorable Mr. Fisache, someday, because you are raising issues that might still help us to get back to yourself.
All right.
I don't think there's anyone that we left out. Your presentation is very clear, points that you have raised in there, your personal experience, and which was helpful, and including what you have written there. Let's take this as a work in progress and actually agree that your contribution is just part of a collective of views that this committee is going to persist with in its compilation of the product, because what came from the department is just but a start. final product will come from these consultations and what we are going to hear from other people. We thank you for this, and then we want to now release you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I appreciate the time and I was given to present. Thank you very much.
Okay. Honorable members, I'm sorry to do this to yourself, but the call and Ms. Machalamba must just confirm that we need you again and we meet you again at 9:30 tomorrow. Is that correct, Ms. Machalamba?
Yes, Chair.
Yes, we have two presentations between that time and the House starting in the afternoon. Is it two?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Honorable members, thank you very much. We value your contributions and we really value our time allocated to the preparations. We will call it a day and until we meet around 9:30 tomorrow morning. Have a good evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Thanks, Chair.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.